Hello and welcome to Disc Dandies, a podcast where each episode two friends share recommendation with one another. We talk about what we liked, what we would change, and try not to judge each other too much over our bad tastes. This week, we're getting overwhelmed by the creative process.
Hey, so I think this would be a funny thing for us to do in the future for our episodes. If you're doing a really serious introduction for a very serious podcast, and then I took out a can of canned air and just sprayed it directly into the microphone while you were talking. I think that would be really funny and something we should do for a future episode.
That has never been done before. I think you're breaking new comedy ground with this.
The last thing that I want for this podcast is for you to feel respected. Let's be honest. You need to be put in your place, and
respected or comfortable.
And I will put you in that place, just so we're clear, audibly.
Is that place underneath your boot?
No. This isn't Helltaker. It's not like that. No.
Step on me, Daddy.
Oh, no. But I just want to let you know, in addition to my 1,024 beverages that I always have here for podcasting, I also have a can of canned air. So just be prepared. Don't get too invested in anything you're saying at any particular moment. It might just be washed out, so to speak.
Oh, I get this. You're literally letting the air out of my my thought balloons.
Man, hey, if this guy's going to be full of hot air, I will be too. Only mine will be cold air because it's canned air.
Don't hold it upside down. That's bad for your devices.
I have a question for you. If I can ask you a question this episode before we get into our topic.
Now on the podcast? I mean, doesn't your girlfriend listen to this as well?
Hey, man, I really need to know your answer to this before we get any further in this arrangement that we have. This is one of those will you press the button questions. I'm sure that you've seen something like this online where it's, something good, but you have to take something bad at the same time. So will you press the button? All video games that sell above a certain number, so a certain number of units or make a certain amount of money, are legally mandated to make a sequel. I mean, this is great, right? All your favorite games that you love but didn't sell well enough, all of a sudden get sequels that you've always wanted. However, the bad part is each sequel is legally required to be a different gameplay genre. So, that real-time strategy game that you loved, that you really want a sequel to, boom, all of a sudden it's a battle royale. You're playing Fortnite instead. You want another Metal Gear Solid, sequel, as much as we'd all love something like that. Nope. It is now a rhythm game. How do you feel about this? Would you press the button?
This is definitely a monkey's paw curling type question, that second half. Because it's it's funny because before we started the podcast, I was telling you that I was playing Bloodborne and I desperately want a sequel to that game. But if they gave me a Bloodborne 2 that was exclusively a pinball game, I would fly to Japan and beat up Hidetaka Miyazaki at his desk.
So this would launch you into anger and would make you buy a very expensive ticket during the pandemic, notwithstanding, and you would go and enact violence on the developer just because you now have Bloodborne pinball.
Yes. Okay. So let me explain, Will.
Well, first of all, that's based. But second of all, I want to hear your justification here.
Okay. So first of all, I am a gamer, Will.
Yes.
I don't need or employ logic or reason.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, I'm a gamer on the internet. I use Twitter. I get mad about stuff that should not matter, but I take more seriously than the children in cages on the border.
Oof. That's a big oof.
Yes. As such, I will get unreasonably angry over a Bloodborne pinball game.
Okay.
But I'll still play it. I'll still pay the full $60, and I'll probably love it. So yeah, I'll press the button.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'd press it too. I really want to play a Metal Gear Solid rhythm game, right? You get the Rock Band equipment back out after 20 years. You get there and you get to play. What's the one song? Sins of the Father. You get to play Sins of the Father on the little toy drums. I think this would be wonderful. I don't think there should be any innovation in terms of coming up with new games or anything like that. I only want to see the same games over and over again. And to help facilitate this, I really do think that we should mandate that these games be a different genre to help juice the creative process, so to speak. I would absolutely press the button. And I am super excited to play Fortnite Bloodborne edition.
Age of Empires, except Persona.
I'm trying to come up with funny things, but all I can think about is Metal Gear Solid rhythm game. So,
I mean, whenever you list off the best one, I mean, it's all downhill.
Right, for sure. Well, I'm glad to hear that we would both press the button in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, you got to go with the chaos. On that note, speaking of chaos, do you want to talk about documentaries?
Yes. I think there was a lot of chaos going on in this documentary, and it's good that the documentary process was able to so skillfully document the chaos that was going on in this particular company at this particular time.
Yeah. Okay. So what we're talking about here is a documentary called Double Fine Adventure, available on YouTube. It'll be linked in the description of this video. It should have been linked in the description of the last video. For everyone to watch before indulging in this podcast. For the purposes of this conversation, we did not. You didn't finish the entire thing, right?
It's very long. It's a lot longer than I thought so. Isn't it like, I didn't do the math, but it looks like it would be like 10 hours long to watch the entire thing. Would you guess that to be correct?
Yeah, it's about the length of a single anime season. And really, it shares a lot of qualities with anime. It has a really, animated and goofy protagonist. That's it. That's all I got. That's as far as that connection goes.
This is pretty long. I got to episode 8, so I got a couple of hours into it. So this would be from the we'll talk about this, but from the funding to the initial concept to the to the growing pains of them trying to get through this creative process. That's about as far as I got. Have you watched the entire thing?
Oh, many times. This is one of not just like my favorite documentary or thing to watch, just like one of my favorite things that has been created ever. And we'll get into that why later on. Unfortunately, because you didn't finish the entire thing, there will be some bits that, some really standout moments that come during the latter half of the documentary that are, they're pretty great. You had asked me if you would lose anything if you skipped ahead to kind of witness some of that stuff. And I don't know how to answer that because I feel like you kind of get what the show or what the documentary is going for in the first, 8 or 9 episodes. And you really kind of get the vibe and what's going on in this documentary and what it's trying to capture. But it's the actual, climax and conclusion of the story of this game that gets more interesting as you go.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and talk about what this actually is.
Yes. So this is Double Fine Adventure. It's a documentary following the creation of the Kickstarter-backed adventure game Broken Age. And it's from the beginning of the creative process to the end. And what that means is that basically Tim Schafer, the creative director and one of the owners of Double Fine, basically launched a Kickstarter campaign for an adventure game. Just loose concept, no plot, no characters, nothing. Basically saying, hey, look, we're going to make an adventure game from scratch and document the entire process on video and release it for free. And early for patrons.
Now, from what I understand, Tim Schafer and his outfit are they come from that old school point and click adventure game world, and we don't really see those games anymore in the current era of gaming. So the whole point of this was to like raise funds for a type of game that wouldn't really be able to be made these days. So that was kind of the impetus for it to being a non-traditional way of funding it, right?
Yeah, the first episode was basically explaining that this game wouldn't have gotten made had they gone to a publisher. This was something that at the time, which this part's important, this was shot in 2012. So, or 2011, 2012, somewhere in that time frame. So at this point, Kickstarter was new, and at this point, this was the biggest thing on Kickstarter. It had the biggest campaign, it had the most success. It was, to them, this was the only way that they would have been able to make a new adventure game, because they just weren't being made at this point.
Yeah, they highlighted that this campaign crashed Kickstarter.
Yeah, it ended up like crushing its goal. They had a goal of like $400,000. And by the time the campaign was over, they were spending $400,000 on backer rewards. It was that successful. And, I mean, they got millions. I think it was over 3 million. I could have that number wrong. Maybe, it was over 3 million that they ended up with. So they actually like crushed their budget. That said, as it goes on, you get into some like production woes, value woes, and the eventual breaking of the adventure game into two halves. And it documents the entire how and why of all of that, and it's incredibly intriguing. But to finish the preamble here, this was a collaboration between two-player productions. They are basically the people who shot and recorded and edited the documentary in collaboration with Double Fine, of course, who had the final say on everything. I'm sure that they went over this with the fine comb together to make sure they were giving forth the image that they wanted to give. And it's not a singular, like one-sided, production.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like this was not like entirely the producers thing that they were creating. It was very much a collaboration. I would not say this was about Double Fine. This was very much created in part by Double Fine.
Yes, because this is not like two-player was not allowed to just walk away and like spin their own message about the production. Yeah, it very much seemed like final say was, this is the message we want. So with that, what are your thoughts going into this, Will?
Well, I have not played the game that this is about, which ended up being Broken Age, although during most of what I watched, they did not know that that's what this game was going to be called. I've never played it. I've actually never really sat down and did a deep dive into any Double Fine game, even though I'm familiar with them and I'm familiar with the types of games that they have. I played maybe a couple of minutes of Psychonauts. I've always wanted to play Grim Fandango, but I do know Tim Schafer, who is the creative director, the head of Double Fine Studios. So I figured, just from knowing who he is and knowing that he has a very bombastic, in your face in a good way, very center of attention type personality, that he would factor heavily into this. So that's what I was expecting, and that really is what I got.
Yeah, and he's he proves to be a very interesting person, both from like the creative process and like in terms of who he is as a person. But for reasons we'll get into a little bit later on, it's not necessarily like, oh, he's a genius or anything like that. It's more just kind of what he reveals about like his creative process that I think is kind of cool.
I'm curious, what were the circumstances of you watching this for the first time?
So I actually grew up as it wasn't really Double Fine at the time. It was like LucasArts, but like Grim Fandango, Secret of Monkey Island, those were games I played on the PC as a kid, back in like way back when.
Yeah. And
I like Grim Fandango was just like a big part of my childhood. I was one of the, I don't know, like 300,000 to 400,000 people who played that game back then. Really loved it. and I one of my favorite platformers of all time, I guess you could call it platformer, action adventure, whatever, is Psychonauts. I really love Psychonauts, and whenever I saw the announcement for this Kickstarter and this campaign, I backed it. I was like, I'm totally backing this. This is awesome. So I pledged to this campaign. I watched the updates as they released them, like these actual episodes. I watched them as they put them out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was really cool. The thing is, though, is I'm also a big fan of documentaries in general. Not all, but there are documentaries that are just like some of my favorite things. And this kind of exceeded my expectations, even as like a fan of like the studio. It's a very high quality documentary, and they go much deeper into everything than I thought they were going to. They even cover some stuff later in the game's production that I'm still kind of surprised today that they revealed. Like, it's part of the talks that we have today about crunch and developer exhaustion and stuff like that. For example, Double Fine, at this point, I believe they were crunching during the development of Broken Age. They're currently a no crunch studio. They don't force employees to crunch anymore.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah, so this is just one of those things that kind of sheds a lot of light on the difficulties of being a developer, which is something I appreciated more about it than it just being, because I'm not gonna lie, ultimately Broken Age is a fine game. I played it, I enjoyed it, but it is the lesser work of art than the documentary itself, I'd say.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting. It must have been really cool for you to watch these episodes as they were coming out. I didn't realize that it was like a series that was released over time until I got pretty close to the end of what I watched when they mentioned the previous episode coming out and what happened since then, before I realized, oh, this was released. These episodes were released and then people would see them before the next one was released later down the road. So, that must have been really cool to be a part of that.
Yeah, it was an awesome experiment on their part, because this is, as far as I know, the first time a developer's ever done something like this. And like the transparency that they put on display was, regardless of your opinion of it, it's unique. And they've continued to do this for their productions since. Like right now, Psychonauts 2, they're doing this for that as well. I haven't seen any of it yet because I want to watch it all together whenever it's finished. I'm not even sure if they're releasing them episodically like they did for Broken Age, but I'm extremely excited to watch Psychonauts 2's development.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I did see in YouTube, because I watched all these on YouTube, I did see, in like recommended for you, there was a couple of Psychonauts 2 production updates, and I haven't seen any of them, but, they very much featured Tim Schafer. They definitely seemed like they were at least kind of in the same style as what we watched. So, yeah, definitely seems like this is a trend they're keeping up.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess let's just like kind of cut to the chase. Like, what was your take on what you watched?
Once I started it, once I was a little bit into it, I did get kind of apprehensive that this would keep my attention, especially since it was about a game that I've never, haven't seen before. I had heard of it before, didn't have any desire to play. I got a little apprehensive about that. But as I watched it, I did kind of get sucked into it. I do think that for a casual watcher, it was a little long, and the fatigue kind of set in for me in a couple of places. There are some documentary techniques that they use that kind of grated on me a little bit, and then Tim Schafer is very much a love him or hate him kind of guy, which I fall in the camp of loving him, but some of that kind of rubs off after a while if you're not super bought into the whole Double Fine, culture. So overall, what I watched, I did like it. I thought it was a really cool look into the creative process, but this as a work of art on its own, I'm not too sold on it being like the best documentary I've ever seen, or being something that I would recommend to other people who aren't already bought into the mythos. But I did enjoy what I watched, so I'm excited to talk about this with you.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, I guess let's just kind of get into the discussion itself then. the first thing I kind of want to touch on, and this is something I feel like loops back around today to a lot of the meta commentary with video games in general, which is the transparency from game developers and their studios and crunch, the creative process, all that stuff. I feel like today you see stuff like Naughty Dog's handling of the marketing for Last of Us 2 or CD Projekt Red's handling of Cyberpunk's launch and stuff. You get a bunch of different narratives, and you don't really get a clear picture of what's actually going on. You get a bunch of horror stories. You get the word of mouth from the developer themselves. The thing that this documentary did whenever it came out is it created just, I mean, near absolute transparency, probably more than we would ever get from any developer. It was filtered and monitored by Double Fine, of course, which I'm sure wouldn't let anything completely horrid come out if it happened. But it's something that I think part of what makes it special is the amount that you see, the amount of uncertainty, all the mistakes. It's all something that is very unique in this documentary because you can see this like hurting the studio's image in some ways, right?
Yeah, it did look very chaotic. I did see a couple of parts where it looked like they clearly didn't, like the studio and then Tim, as a result, just didn't know what they were trying to do. So they were just kind of like doing this and that, changing things here and there. And that just seemed like a really chaotic environment to be in, especially since they started this after getting the funding. Tim was like, we don't have an idea. My first thing is to come up with an actual idea for this game. Now, with the transparency part, this is something that I kind of keep thinking about when we talk about this documentary, is that, this is a result of them raising like $1 million on Kickstarter. Was it more than $1 million or was it $1 million?
It was over 3 million.
Yeah, so multiple millions on Kickstarter. Now, I've never kickstarted anything. I've never actually been a part of that website, but my understanding is that they have a big emphasis on transparency. That like if you're giving money to people to kickstart something, that there is a expectation of communication and all that stuff to prove that you're doing that you're being ethical and doing what you say you're doing with that money. And I think that this documentary was a really great way for them to kind of provide that transparency while having that Tim Schafer flair on it. Although, yeah, that really does make me wonder how much was left on the cutting room floor. Like, yeah, it looks very transparent, but is it actually? I guess we don't really know the answer to that.
Well, I mean, so my thing with this documentary is the stuff they did show, I felt like was way above and beyond the amount of transparency you get on Kickstarter, even with them giving developer updates. Because Kickstarter just requires that you give updates on your game. It comes later in the season, but one of the lead programmers, her name's Anna, and this is kind of important to this discussion. She actually undergoes some ailment, if I understand correctly, partly due to the crunch and the amount she was working.
Oh, okay.
They showed that, which is like kind of insane, and they kind of stressed during that time that because of some conditions leading up to that point, she was really like taking on the brunt of the programming work for the game. Yeah. And she got sick and was working from home and stuff like that. And that's the sort of thing where it's like, sure, if they left some stuff on the cutting room floor, I'm sure it was bad. But the stuff they did give is just unorthodox and way past the line in terms of what you would expect from Kickstarter.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. That with that being in there, that's definitely right, because that definitely does not look good on you as a as a company. So yeah, I guess I'll take that. But one other thing that kind of makes me, I don't want to say question the transparency, but it kind of rubs me the wrong way about it, is that it's very produced. I don't want to say that all of it is scripted or anything like that, but there are definitely some parts where it's pretty clear that, it's not a setup. It's like maybe they have a conversation, but then they have to do the conversation again, and it's just very awkward because they're clearly trying to like recreate something that just happened, or do something like that. There are definitely points where I don't think that's actually organically how that conversation happened, or something like that. It looks good and it sounds great, but it's like it takes me out of it. It's kind of like, well, if you're restaging stuff like this, or at least it seems like you're restaging stuff, then it hurts the credibility and hurts the idea of transparency.
But that would be speculative, right? Because as far as we saw, they didn't. I mean, we didn't really have any real evidence that was something that they were doing.
It certainly seems that way in some parts. I will say I don't know. I guess I don't want to throw accusations around, but I can think of one point in particular, and I can't really point it out because it's just a person walking into a room and then being like, "Hey, show me what you're doing." But it just, we as humans know how humans speak. We know how normal conversation happens in the real world, and you can tell when it's not real conversation, or at least maybe I feel like I can. But stuff like that doesn't really hurt the documentary, but it definitely makes me kind of look at it with slightly squinted eyes.
Yeah, and that is always the really tough thing about documentaries too, especially when you're in a working environment, is whenever you see like the boss come into the room and the camera's already in there with the employee, and then it kind of is supposed to be a normal conversation. It's not like the employee sat there not noticing the camera, like it is. There is definitely some amount of staging that goes to this stuff, which is, I agree with you. It can be a little like abrasive to the experience, because you're just like, oh, okay, well, this was set up a little bit.
I did like how they didn't try to act like they weren't there. Like they referenced the cameras every now and then. The one-on-one interviews, which is common in documentaries, kind of just highlighting the fact that yes, there is a film crew here filming this. I do like how they lampshaded it, and that actually helps sell the transparency idea. So I think that was good. Overall, I would give it a good score in the transparency department, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay. So the next thing I kind of want to talk about here, Will, and this is like a really interesting thing about this documentary in particular. I mean, is its style. I wouldn't call this a happy documentary, weirdly enough to say. There are certainly happy moments in it, but it's stressful, like watching it.
Stressful.
And it definitely breaks the illusion that I guess most people would have whenever you ask them like, hey, what do you want to do with your life? And they're like, oh, I want to make video games. Whenever you hear that, you would think like, oh, it's going to be fun. I'm going to be making things I want to play. I'm going to be making like happy things. This very much shows that is just not the case. I would describe like the tone for the majority of it as melancholic. There's definitely like beautiful moments and happy moments, but for the most of the time, there's just a lot of strain.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Even for Tim, who is like, the most boisterous, upfront personality out of all of them. As it goes on, you can really hear, kind of see things weighing down on him. And clearly he's able to kind of shrug it off when he needs to. But, when he actually starts talking details and that kind of persona drops a little bit, yeah, you can see that this is like hard work. All that being said, I do think that this documentary does a good job of highlighting how you can find joy in hard work. All of these people, and from what I saw, I understand that there's more of it that I didn't see. From what I saw, all these people really wanted to be there. They all were invested into the project. They all wanted it to be as good as it possibly could be. And at least from what I could see, they were really getting a sense of fulfillment out of doing all of this creative work. And I'd say that goes for Tim as well. This was clearly like a passion project for all of them. And that shows through, and that's a good thing. So maybe that like tempers the melancholy a little bit, but I do understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, one part I do really like in particular was, I forget his name, but he's one of the programmers that they introduced in the first few episodes. He reveals that he was a fan of Tim Schafer and like the adventure games back from his childhood, and he was getting to work on an adventure game with Tim Schafer and was excited about that. There was definitely some really like cool moments where you're like, man, well, one, Tim Schafer's old. Two, like, it is something I think we all think about in some capacity, where it'd be like, I would love to just be involved with these people that were so like formative in my early entertainment years. You know, I'll say like there's always like I'm always afraid to meet my like my heroes type. You know, just from hearing and seeing like people talk about these things, but like it is something I always think about, is just like I would love to just be able to talk to those guys and be like, well, what made you think about this? You know.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, lots of people who were I feel like I keep saying this, I don't mean it in a bad way, but like bought into the Double Fine ethos, way of doing things. I don't think anyone there was just, I'm here to collect the paycheck and I go home and I don't think about this. So yeah, that was cool to see.
All right, you've alluded to it a little bit. What do you think of the whole like Tim Schafer portions of this documentary?
I think that it's, I won't say he's the entirety of Double Fine, but he is Double Fine. I think most people know what I mean when I say that. He really, like, even through the hard parts, he really was enjoying himself. I can tell that he's the kind of person that wants the camera to be on him. He wants to be the center of attention. He wants the documentary to, not be about him, but for him to be a central figure inside this. And I'm sure that was part of the motivation for doing this documentary, is that he got to be on camera. He got to be the main character for a little bit. I think that's cool. I think that Tim, maybe there's something about him, I don't know, but from everything that I've seen, Tim seems like a good guy. He seems like, he cares about all the things that are going around him. He has really honest, creative motivations. I could see where people who are into his vision would very much consider it to be a passion project, to be working under him. Something that I thought about a lot was like, what is the purpose of this documentary? And we talked about how it's like a transparency. It's a piece of showing the transparency of this game that people gave their own money to make. I don't think the documentary actually does a good job of highlighting the game. And maybe it does towards the end, but this game really, I struggled to even think that the documentary is really about the game. In some ways, it's about Tim, and his thing. So like, I was like, is this documentary like advertising the game? No, I think it's advertising Tim and Double Fine as these creative geniuses. I don't think that's a bad thing. And he's really does seem like a good guy, but it's kind of like, or at least me, I was kind of like, shouldn't you guys be trying to like advertise the game? I'm sitting here with money and possibly could buy this game, but you're not really, you're making me like care about you all instead of making me want to buy this game you're making.
Yeah, I feel like that just kind of goes hand in hand with the stage of development that they were in by the time you finished watching. Because at episode 8, they hadn't even really like gotten real gameplay together. It was still pretty early in the process,
right? Yeah,
like I believe you're still like an episode or two away from them even naming the game.
Yeah, I was about to say they're still calling it Reds.
Yeah, so like it definitely becomes more about that once it starts coming together. I do think that like the front half of it, you are kind of paying to see them talk about Double Fine and Tim Schafer, because I think that is the other half of this documentary, especially in those early parts, is talking about why this whole process is special. I mean, he would laugh at me if he heard me say this, but it's just kind of the truth. Like Tim Schafer is one of like the game industry like legends, I guess you would call them. But just like he would be on the Mount Rushmore of like famous people from the game industry. Now, what I feel like the like one of the like secondary purposes of this documentary is to kind of deflate that, which is show them in their environment doing the work. Because whenever you actually see Tim Schafer doing his everyday and how uncertain and like, I guess like normal he actually is, and how much of like what he's doing is a front to like kind of like pop tension from his team and stuff like that. I think that's more what it's doing. Is it's just like Tim Schafer's just a dude, you know what I mean? Like he writes in spiral notebooks with his ideas and hangs on to them from like 10 years ago, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of like like kind of crunchiness to him, which I really liked about this documentary that I don't think we would have seen otherwise. Like he would have just remained like a David Jaffe type that you just hear about but never see anything about.
Yeah, actually, I really like that you brought up the notebooks. I wanted to specifically mention that as part of the kind of creative process. I loved him showing off those notebooks and the fact that he just sits down and writes just like a stream of consciousness and comes up with this stuff. And how I really like the story of how he was brainstorming ideas for the title of Grim Fandango. And once he got there, he drew it big and was like, I'm a genius. I really like that. And I loved seeing those little like parts of the creative process. So it was really cool how they highlighted those notebooks.
That's actually exactly what it's like when we're naming our episodes. It's just as revelatory, and we're just as genius when we do it.
Yeah, if only you all could see our Discord logs and the kind of horse duty that we come up with for the title of our content.
There are mountains of it. But I guess all of this kind of bridges into the main success of this, which is like, which is the reason why I think I exhorted this to you. I didn't really make this exhortation with the intent of us playing Broken Age or making you interested in Broken Age, which I guess kind of goes back to your point about it, like not really servicing the game, at least not until the second half, whenever it actually starts materializing. Mm-hmm. But the point of this is like the main point. What it succeeds most at doing is just kind of dispelling any air that game development is just this wholly fun thing, and it just goes into the cost and the production woes that come with game development, as well as the fact that whenever they were losing their shit in the first episode about getting 3 million, an episode later they're like, well, it's a small budget game. Mm-hmm. $3 million is not a lot to make this game.
Right.
And we're going to have a small staff for it. And it was just like, whoa, you guys were just saying you could have made it on 400,000.
Yep.
And what? And now you guys are calling it a small budget. It was just, it does an insanely, and this is where I think it gets most of its credit, regardless of the rest of the show. In a vacuum, I think it just is a huge success in terms of just letting people know, hey, game development is extremely expensive. It is not pretty.
I was really struck by how many people would start working at Double Fine or start working on the project after it had already started, and then would leave a couple months later. Some of the artists were only there for the initial part. I think some of the interns were only there for a couple of months. I was not expecting that. I assumed it would be everyone is there at the start and sticks it out till the end. So that was a real surprise to me, and not something I would even think about without seeing this documentary.
Yeah, okay, and so I love that you bring that up, because whenever you look at something like, just recently, this was announced a couple of weeks ago, Casey Hudson and a couple other high-profile BioWare guys left BioWare, and they're apparently in mid-production of the next Dragon Age game.
Oh, okay.
Casey Hudson's a creative director, meaning he's their Tim Schafer. He's the ideas guy. He's the one that everyone's kind of congealing around to make the project what it is. He's got the vision, and everyone's trying to meet that vision. What happens when your creative lead leaves? It's not like your programmer or your intern leaves or something like that. It's like the idea for the game is now gone, mm-hmm. and that. I think that's what this documentary, I'm going to say it again, but succeeds at doing, is going man, this is it's a big deal when you lose those pieces. Mm-hmm. And, for bigger budget studios and stuff like that, that's why we see these kind of broken, not so great products come out sometimes, is because they have that churn. They have people leave and come in midway through production. I just start thinking about the files they must have downloaded to their computer and not on some shared drive or something like that on the cloud. Yeah. And what is being lost when those people leave.
Yeah, that sounds tough. And it sounds like this game also had those issues. Yeah, so that's something I wouldn't really have thought about. One other thing about this game that kind of really took me by surprise is, and maybe this is just Tim Schafer's style, but I was surprised to see that they did not have a single like conceptual idea for the game before they raised all of this money. All they had was just point and click adventure game.
Yeah, the whole pitch was you're going to, like, the documentary is going to capture the entire process, which is us conceptualizing the game to us finishing the game. And while I think that is very cool, you could also see how much stress that put on everyone, because the image I have in my mind for game development, if you're not at a big budget studio, is you go, hey, I want to make this type of game, or you already have the idea in your head and you're trying to figure out which genre fits that best. I figure it's got to be one of those things. In this situation, they were like, we're feeling nostalgic about adventure games. We want to make an adventure game. Let's do that. And then they went, oh, shit. What should it be about? And it was super wild to see that. Like, even though it's like, it was intentional, even though it was something that was a part of this documentary, like, they wanted to see everything from scratch. I think it was also kind of a double-edged sword. You know,
it didn't really endear me to the game to know that there wasn't like a deep conceptual concept at the core of it. We've talked about this before, but I really appreciate like very well conceived and well designed ideas. I don't want to see the seams on things because it kind of diminishes whether, this is really a thing that needs to exist in the world. So like for them to like not even have a concept at the beginning kind of makes me think, well, is this really even something that I want to spend my time on? Because it doesn't feel like this was something that anyone felt super strongly about at the beginning when you started this. It's almost like you just kind of picked it up out of thin air. I know that kind of diminishes the hard work that put into there, but that was something that I was not expecting to see.
I think I agree with that. Having played Broken Age, I can say like I enjoyed Broken Age. It has a very good vibes. It's a very pretty game. Like the hard work is definitely showing, but it is one of those games that you're both in the documentary and playing it, you can tell people came onto that project because they wanted to work with Tim Schafer and they wanted to make an adventure game, not because any one of them was telling a very personal story that we could tell. And correct us if we're wrong, listener. Please interact with our podcast.
Yes. Like, subscribe, hit the bell icon, comment so the algorithm shares us more. Do all that stuff. I'll pay you.
Yeah, tell us that we're idiots in the comments and how personal this was to whoever on the team. But even from the looks that we get at it, the story itself is more in service of the idea, not so much like the other way around, which is what I feel like makes good stories in games. But like that's how this kind of, I think this is all like what you just pointed out about it being diminished, I think is actually reflective in the final product. It's a good game, but it's not going to knock your socks off. And it's kind of part of why I think that this game, the project itself was special, not necessarily the end product. The fact that I think, again, that's why I think the documentary is a bigger standout than the game, is because I think the documentary ended up being the most special thing out of that Kickstarter.
Sure. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. All of that being said, I did really like how much of this documentary hammered home the idea that to be creative, it requires work. I struggle with this. We have this content. I do some other things. I don't think of myself as a very creative person. Now, obviously, Tim and like the artist and pretty much everyone there is a creative person, but it wasn't really that creativity that put this game into being. It was hard work. And I just really enjoyed seeing that, that's where things get made. Like if you are willing to put in the work and do this and that, and inject a little bit of your own creativity along the way, with like teamwork and other things like that, you can make something that is creative by just putting in the work to do it. I think that this really highlights that and is a good lesson for myself and everyone else. Real quick, I wanted to mention a couple of notes that I have here. Did it ever like come off to you that their office culture was a little weird? Like maybe a little non-PC, if you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. So that's actually one of the points that I thought about talking about, but really I kind of like graded myself out of before we started recording. Was like talking about 2012 versus, 2021. Yeah, that was definitely very evident. Like going back and watching this, it was very like there is some stuff that like in one of the first meetings we see, they have their community manager talking and or like walk into the room or something like that for one of their stand-up meetings, and Tim kind of offhandedly says over to him, hey, why don't you stand up? And the joke being that the guy's really short. And the joke came off as really mean. I'm sure it was good spirited, and the two maybe have a relationship off camera that like afforded that and was fine. But in the moment, I was like, oh, that was kind of rude, and like something I don't feel like you see today. People seem to be a little bit more considerate, and I don't think that would have been accepted.
Yeah, that's what I want to highlight. I don't want to make any judgments about their particular office culture because, again, none of it was like super egregious. There was no like harassment or anything that we saw. But we're watching it here in 2021, and I did see a few things I was like, I'm not surprised that flew in an office in 2011, 2012. But like even in these like super lax, creative offices, I don't think you could get away with making comments like that, or having that type of like nerd culture going on. That's not paying attention to people's to the realities of people and being respectful to them. So that was a little weird. I did really like kind of the time capsule aspect of this. If you watch this documentary, it's not hard to say this was made in 2017, 2018. It's only the the super old iPhones that really stick out and tell you, hey, this was made, almost 10 years ago. So that was really cool to see. It really stuck out once you noticed it.
Yeah, and to the point, real quick before we move on to the time capsule portion, I just want to point out that I think that one of the reasons why I point out that maybe that comment was a little bit more accepted or maybe disserviced by being on camera was the fact that that studio has very little turnover, and a lot of the people you see in this documentary are still working there today. And it's one of those things that's hard because you see it on camera, like that did not sit well with me. But then you look and you're like, oh, this person's still working at Double Fine. Now, obviously, like they don't seem to have a toxic work culture there, and publicly at least, their image has improved a lot. Mostly just with like them being a no crunch studio. I assume some of that came from this documentary, like people being like, hey, kind of sucks that happened to Anna, but. But that said, the time capsule aspect of this, there's also like little things like word choices and like memes and stuff like that they reference. Just things from 2012 that are like, oh my God, I can't. Yeah, that's wild that's still a thing. And you see like the old iPhones and you're just like, I remember when that was the new tech. There's little, it's not extremely evident. Like you said, you could have mistaken this for 2015, 2017, whatever. But there's just like these little things, like the size of their monitors, like, how chunky they are in the back and stuff like that. And it's just like, it's wild how much little things have changed since then, despite it being relatively familiar.
Sure, yeah. One more thing I want to highlight before we go into the quick hits. My absolute favorite part of this documentary was when they were talking to the artist Peter Chen, who apparently has worked with Tim Schafer on like all of his Double Fine projects and had to leave pretty early in the process. There's a part where they're talking about changing different art things, and Peter's like, I only have a certain amount of time left to do all this stuff. The documentary spends a little bit extra time talking to him about his creative process, and how he would like go out into nature and like get refreshed and get ideas there. How he would, like burn drawings that he did that he was unhappy with, and how it was like a lesson on letting go. I really appreciated the time that they spent with Peter, and I honestly kind of want to see a documentary just about him and his process.
Yeah, those types of guys are like definitely the one that I engage the most with. They're the composer in the game. Whenever he comes up a little bit later on in the documentary, you see some of that with him as well, and it's also just as enticing. You also just really like seeing like the environments that they like develop in. It's nice. I agree with you. It was a nice little look into one of the more like niche aspects of the games, or like one of the more corner aspects. It was nice getting to know people in that way and how they created, because for me it's just like I stress myself into it or guilt myself into it. Even though I'm looking forward to these things, I always feel like I really need to do something good, and it's funny to just watch these people like put themselves in the element to do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, that's all I wanted to highlight. Let's move on to some quick hits.
Sure. So first of all, did this documentary make you interested in playing Broken Age at all, Will?
Slightly. And some of that is from having this conversation with you. Up until like the tail end of what I saw, there really was no game. You just saw concept art and stuff. Towards the end, I started seeing like models moving a little bit, and I thought that was kind of intriguing. So I feel like it's a function of how much I watched. I bet if you watch towards the end, it does make you want to play the game. But as of right now, I think I would be fine if I never play Broken Age. And I hate to say it, and I hate to say that I watched the documentary about it and didn't even feel like I wanted to play it. But I guess that's just how I feel about it. I know that you've already played it and you have your opinions about it. Does rewatching this documentary make you want to go back and play it again?
Not necessarily. Like I said, I enjoyed it whenever I first played it, and I think it's actually a really beautiful game. Like the art in it is fantastic, and it was obviously like a well-designed game. But it's one of those games that like once you've seen it, you've seen it. Like it does its special thing, but it's not stand out enough, at least to me, that it's warrants replays. I think that there are some other fundamental pacing issues with it that like kind of like mar it, and there's also like a weird like we kind of alluded to before, like a weird lack of passion in the game as well. Sure. It's more like, hey, this is well designed, this looks really pretty, but we did this as more as function rather than like than out of inspiration.
Sure,
but.
Yeah.
But I will say that it every time I watch this, it does renew my appreciation for that game specifically, because I guess it's kind of like sharing the trauma with the developers as I watch them make it. I kind of have an affection for it, even though like the game isn't necessarily one of my favorite adventure games.
Sure. Well, let me ask you. Here's my quick hit. Because I have never played any Double Fine game front to back. If I wanted to, which game should I start with?
Psychonauts. It's like hands down great, and honestly, like the controls have aged really well as well. It's a game that that is just a front to end really awesome, hilarious, like fun game. It's not particularly hard. The writing is probably some of the best that Double Fine has ever done. I love that game. And I think it is especially with the remaster they did, I think it's just a great game to go back to.
All right, it is on my list of games to play.
Okay, so and it's a classic. I think that goes without saying at this point, and I'm extremely excited to play too. So on this note, should more studios do this? Would you like to see more transparency, even if it's just on this level, from game development studios or even movie studios for that matter?
This is tough. I know everyone's going to say yes. Everyone wants as much information as they want. I think that some games are harmed by seeing how the sausage is made. We talked about conceptual, like, core ideas that are like, from the world of forms, and that are, it's basically we're reaching out and trying to pull out something full formed. I think that those experiences are better, and then transparency actually diminishes that kind of thing. Also, I think the whole like the gamers calling for more transparency in how their games are made is really just selfishness. It's like I want you to do everything I want you to do, and then I'm going to yell at you when you don't do things I don't want you to do. I would say no, because I want to give creators more freedom to not be answerable to us as players or even like publishers or anything that lets creators just create what they want to create. I want to make that environment for them.
Yeah, okay, so as far as the creative process of the game, like coming up with ideas and like revealing how the sausage is made and stuff like that, like the actual, like the intellectual aspect of things, I think I agree with you. I don't want to see this out of every game because there are certain mysteries that I kind of want to leave that way. That said, one bit of like your statement that I will push back against is that I do think that a lot of people these days want transparency because of the working conditions we now understand about the gaming industry and how much of that is concealed and lied about.
Sure, yeah, and that totally makes sense. I would say that's a whole separate issue from what we're talking about, but please explain what you're saying.
Oh, no, for me, I think that the two issues are like very much intertwined. I don't think it's very separate. I think that one of the strengths of this documentary is that we did get to see what developing a game was like and how unhealthy it was to the developers. It's not just the creative aspect that I think is being that comes with that transparency. It's also the like what are you doing to your employees in this very poorly policed industry? Like I would be very interested, for example, to see a documentary on people like working on Fortnite right now, because the rate at which they put out updates and the size of them, there's no way that Epic isn't crunching their asses off. You know what I mean? And I think that's the type of transparency I absolutely want to see from studios. I want to see like, yeah, what are your employee hours looking like on average, and like how much pressure are you putting on them to come in and work those 60-hour weeks.
Yes, you're absolutely right. We should have that transparency, and we should have that transparency from every single corporation that operates in the world.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, yes. I do think that that's separate from the creative process, but I 100% agree with you. The companies need to be held accountable about their labor practices. So totally on board for that.
Okay. So I guess my last one that I want to hit on, out of what you saw, did you have any favorite moments?
See, I feel bad because I don't think I looked at the quick hits too closely before blowing my load, so to speak, in the topic. I mean, the ones that stuck out to me the most, the notebook that Tim Schafer was showing off, the moments with the artist Peter Chen, I thought were really good. One that I haven't mentioned and I'll use here is that there is a point early when Tim Schafer is talking about like a previous experience in the games industry and how on a previous project he was. They were putting in language or like going to a convention or something like that and basically acting like they were already famous, putting their name on the front of the box, for the game or something like that. And he says, to get famous, you have to act like you're famous. And I think that really encapsulates what all of this is about. This whole documentary is basically acting like you're famous. It's basically setting up the image that they want us to have about this game and about themselves. And that's exactly what they're doing. Tim Schafer, being this personality that he is, he is that because he wants us to think of him as that. So that moment really got the gears turning. How about you? What is your number one favorite moment from this?
It's the moment I probably think about, like my main takeaway from this whole documentary, and it's also pretty early on. I think it's episode 2 or so. But the reason why it could have come at any point in the season, but it was a discussion between Tim Schafer and Ron Gilbert, both like again like adventure game legends in the industry, two people that have a lot of experience, a lot of insight into the creative process for these games, and just really like in games in general. And they're talking about adventure games and their relevance in like gaming history. And one of the statements that Ron Gilbert makes to Tim Schafer is that he basically says, I wonder if the success of adventure games and the reason why people want more adventure games is because they actually really loved those adventure games, or if it was because they just have that nostalgia for them. It was what they had access to as a kid, and it's what they understood how to play as kids. Is the reason why this genre dead because it's just not marketed enough, or is it because it's actually just not good.
Yeah, has
like,
society moved beyond the need for point and click action or point and click adventure games?
Yeah, and I think about that all the time because it's something I feel like that's applicable to other, not just mediums of games, but also just nostalgia in general, things that we care about. It's tough when you look back on things you really loved and maybe don't have as much access to. And you wonder, like it's tough to determine whether or not those things were actually good or those memories were actually good or if it was just good because of this place you were at back in that time. And it was just like a really insightful quote from him that I don't know. Like I liked playing Broken Age the entire time. That quote just kept ringing in my head. I was like, I really loved Grim Fandango growing up. I really loved Secret of Monkey Island. And playing this, I'm just not enjoying it as much. And it makes me wonder, is it because of the quality of Broken Age, or is it because maybe those games aren't as good as I remember them being? And I mean, I'm sure there's some level of quality that's enjoyable about them, but is that genre just a dead genre because, like you said, we've evolved past them? And I think about it a lot, and I think that's just a really like great quote from this entire thing, because you could see it even throw some doubt into Tim's head when Ron Gilbert says that. It was almost like well, we kickstarted the game, so we're doing it anyways. But the look on his face whenever Ron said that made me just like, I wanted to hear the rest of that conversation really bad.
Sure. Yeah. That's a really good moment, and something I was also thinking about. I mean, I don't have the answer to it, but definitely something to keep in mind for the people out there who want to play these games and also might have the inkling to create something like this. If this is how a story is supposed to be told, I want these games to exist and be able to be told in this format. So hopefully this is not the end of point and click action adventure or point and click adventure games.
Yeah, hopefully not. At the end of the day, we'll probably just have, I think adventure games, and this is not really like a punch at Naughty Dog or anything like that, but I do think that adventure games have kind of become our Uncharted's and Last of Us's in a way. Like if you want a narratively driven game, they're probably going to be a little bit bigger than just an adventure game. Now, there's probably more meat to it these days.
Sure. Yeah. So, for better or for worse, I am actually interested in watching the rest of this. I might, put this on and play on my second monitor while I'm playing a Magic Arena or something like this. But I don't think I'll play Broken Age, but I do think that I'll finish the rest of this documentary.
Yeah, and when you do, please give us an update. I really want to hear the rest of your thoughts, especially on the back half, because there's some really poignant, like profound moments that come in the back half too, especially as the project kind of spirals a little bit. Maybe we can have a little bit of a like post discussion on it and like the back half of an episode in the future.
Sure.
But anyways, I think that does it, at least for now, for Broken Age, or not Broken Age, but for Double Fine Adventure. And if you're ready, I'd like to hear your exhortation.
Absolutely.
For next week.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the exhortation. Lots of food for thought. We're going back to video games for mine. Have you ever heard of the very, very indie game Yumi Nikki?
I have not, no.
Okay, I don't want to spoil too much about this. It's very atmospheric. This is definitely in the vein of like What Remains of Edith Finch. So there's no action or anything like that. It's really more of an exploration game, but it's on the weird side. And it's made by a very reclusive Japanese indie developer. Probably just made it in his basement, or whoever it is. Just made it in their bedroom or something like that. But it's very much exploration, and it gets weird. I'll leave it at that. It's a bit of a cult classic, so it's been out for a number of years, and was originally made an RPG maker, and just recently was updated by another publisher to be playable on Steam. So we're going to get into this. Just be ready for something that's very atmospheric and very weird.
Okay, well, I'm excited to check it out. I love me some good indie games, and a cult classic I haven't heard about is exciting.
Yeah, honestly, maybe saying it's a part of gaming history might be overselling it a little bit, but this is definitely a touchstone for a certain segment of the gaming population.
Well, I'm excited to check it out, man.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's get into our back matter here, kind of put a point on this one. So I know that both of us have been super busy since the last time we spoke, but what have you been getting up to since the last time we talked?
So in the free time that I've had, I have just been de-stressing with comfort food games, mainly like, my usual From Software degenerate trash. But I did, after our discussion in the last episode, play a good bit more Ghost of Tsushima. I spent like most of my free time on the last weekend playing it. It's fantastic. That game is just it is probably my second favorite PlayStation exclusive that I've played so far, which I think is like really high praise for it. Will, you're a Metal Gear fan. This is Metal Gear with like ninja samurai dudes.
Really?
It is very much up that alley, and I think it'd be up yours. But it gets a big commendation from me. Dandy AF. Great game.
That's very interesting. No one has ever explained it that way. You're the first person I've seen make that comparison. So I did not. You did not have my attention before, but you do now.
Yeah, it's not in tone or story that it gets the Metal Gear connection. It's in attention to detail and the stealth. It's more like, it's not a stealth game that is forgiving. You're not like kind of like how Metal Gear is. You can't just like walk directly in front of someone and them not detect you. You know, like and also like it's very precise in terms of like the mechanics. You're not just like quick shooting bows or anything like that. You have to like kind of take your time, be methodical. It is. I would say the comparisons I got the most for it before I played it was like Assassin's Creed. And I think people said that because you have forts that you infiltrate at some point in the game. I think that's a little overstated. I think a large portion of that game draws more comparisons to something like Metal Gear, Oh,
that's very interesting. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're having fun with it. Sounds like we'll get more updates in the future.
Oh, for sure. I'm looking forward to playing more of it. One other update I have for you, Will. This one's going to be brief, but the YouTube channel Chocolate Cacao.
Oh, this is so good. My girlfriend and I have been watching these nonstop since you and your girlfriend recommended them to us.
Yeah, we started watching it from the beginning. We were just kind of watching them retroactively, like working our way from the beginning and working way backwards. But Tristan had the idea she wanted to see it from the beginning. And my God, that channel has undergone some evolution.
Has it really?
Yeah. It is completely different in the beginning. And it's great watching him watching the guy who runs this YouTube channel kind of like find his identity as it goes. Mm-hmm. And it's exciting for me because I'm like, we're Chocolate Cacao. Right now, we're in the rough, kind of scrappy stage of the creation, but soon we're going to have a really popular podcast with millions of followers, right?
That's a little, I totally understand what you're saying, and you're 100% correct, but that is a little sad to think that whatever we're making right now is automatically bad no matter how hard we try on it, and it won't be until years down the road until and we go we do all this evolution before we're actually something that people can care about. I totally get it, but that is kind of sad, isn't it?
I mean, yeah, everything we're making right now is crap, Will, and I'm very depressed about it.
Yeah,
but I'm excited to take these podcast scraps with you, though. It is enjoyable.
I love this guy. I like how the juxtaposition between very serious, here is how I'm creating this chocolate confection, and then towards the end, once it's complete and you really start to see his personality come out. I've actually started doing the nice cacao pose for my girlfriend around the house as a joke. It's this guy's really cool.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I aspire to be him. So I guess, are there any updates from you, Will? Anything you've been getting into, or has it just been all work and no play for you?
I hate to say, I haven't really gotten into much recently. You may have noticed I haven't really been on Discord at all this week. Yeah, trying to get into my new routine, and my girlfriend is too. It's just a really stressful time around here, so I'm glad that we're still able to do this. Not gonna let my dandy dogs down, but just a lot busy stuff. So hopefully next episode I'll have something exciting to talk about here. But for now, it's just nose to the grindstone, as they say.
Yeah, well, hopefully it starts easing up on you soon, bud.
Yeah, it's just everyone pretend I said something funny right here.
Yeah, Will's great. He's fine. Nothing wrong with his life right now. He's keeping it together. But do you want to take us out?
Yeah, I think it's about time to button this one up. So thank you for listening. Sorry, excuse me. Excuse me.
Sorry, I didn't catch what you said there, Will.
Excuse me, let me try that again. Thank you for listening to this episode of Disc Dandies. We appreciate it every episode. You can follow Jordan on Twitter at Action Pancake. I'm at Aggro Rhetoric on Twitter, and we would love it if you would follow along with our exhortations and stay up to date on all the latest Disc Dandies excitement at Disc Dandies Pod. We hope you join us here next episode for another spin with the Disc Dandies. Very much appreciate that you're putting in extra work for our content, and I just really appreciate it. So thank you for doing that.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I want to let you know I feel a... What in the world was that?
I'm sorry. Excuse me. Please continue.
Are you trolling me right now, or
no? I seriously want to hear what's on your mind.
If you're gonna start doing that again, I'm gonna divorce you.
Anyway, why don't we go ahead and get started on this episode? I really think this is going to be good. And I thought that the documentary that you had us watch was a lot more interesting than I thought it was going to be.
Is that a dunk? Is that a dunk?
No, not at all. I meant that entirely seriously.
I'm excited to talk about it. What are you doing?
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm done. I just thought, I was looking at my... Excuse me. I was looking at my mouse and it looked very dirty, so I decided I wanted to go ahead and just spritz it a little bit with some canned air.
Swear to God, if you blow that air in the mic while I'm doing this introduction, I'm going to drive to your house and break your legs.
Oh, that would be so good. I so wish you would do that, please.
It would be great content.
I think that's what the Dandy Dogs really want, is there for their beloved host to be horribly maimed at each